Hello and welcome to Fine is a Four-Letter Word. My guest today is Joe Kelly. We were introduced by a past guest, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so excited that she introduced us because you have such an amazing story and I'm so eager to get into it. So welcome to the show, Joe.
Well, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So the first question I always start out with for everybody is, what were the values and beliefs that you were raised with that contributed to you becoming who you've become?
Yeah, awesome. And it's a great question because I think a lot of the values and beliefs that I was raised with, got me to a certain point in my life, and then they stopped serving me at a certain
Mm.
point in my life. I'm from the Northeast. I'm from Massachusetts. Boston area. Cape Cod is where I was born and raised. And family was a big part of growing up. And even people that weren't even blood related that were close to the family were aunts and uncles.
I
You
have that
know,
too. Hmm.
yeah, yeah. And we were taught you take care of your own, and other people can make mistakes and you might have looked at them differently, but when it came to family, it was blood was thicker than water type of thing. Those were the what was instilled in me. Um, but also, athletics for me was a big thing. I didn't come from a very affluent family. A lot of my cousins, and there were a lot of them because I'm Irish, Cape Verdean, and when you're Cape Verdean, we have a lot of cousins.
Okay.
so, so that was big. That was big as well because everyone played sports. And also being from Massachusetts, and I live in Florida now. The one thing that I see that's big different when you're taking out of an area and put somewhere else is, and I notice it a lot now, is the Northeast. It's a lot blue collar. It's very blue collar. I was taught from an early age that to get a job with that was union benefits, what I mean, security, and it really didn't matter, the amount of money that you were making. It meant more to have the benefit aspect of it, and
Interesting.
most of my family were all first responders. And obviously when you get into my story, I mean, I thought I had arrived, and that was the king job for me. My sight was always there, being a police officer for years. But in Florida, it's quite different. Florida is more of an entrepreneur state. Where
Yes.
it's you work more for yourself. It's not work harder; it's work smarter. So it's been a big change and a change for the good. So those were the core values: is family, God, and basically working.
Yeah. So, and I think it depends on the area of the state. Like, I don't know that we could say like all of Massachusetts and all of Florida, but I
Of course.
have had similar experience. I lived in South Florida for 11 years too. And it is a lot of entrepreneurial spirit there for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's nice. I love it here. So.
Cool. So this is what you grew up with. And then when you got to be an adult and you were looking for a career, how did that path go? Like you said, you went into be following in your family's footsteps of becoming a first responder. Did you
So,
like how did you
my
get to the point?
yeah. So a
I was
lot of
going to
a
say, how
lot
did
of
you get to the point to choose where you which part of first responder you were going into?
Well, all my family were mostly firefighters, nurses, or this and that. I had one uncle who was a police officer. My dad always says, "You took a left instead of a right," because I joined the police department instead of the fire department. But for me, like the first question you asked, values and stuff, athletics and family and that stuff, that got me to college on scholarships for football and baseball. It worked me for a very, very long time. And then, when I graduated college, I mean, I always wanted to do something where I didn't have to sit behind a desk.
Hmm.
I wanted to be able to use my athletic ability. I loved helping people. I liked growing up the authority figure, as a police officer, being able to actually make decisions and help people. So growing up in that environment and all that talk and my dad's, radio going off in the background and, the excitement of something new every day. Obviously as a kid, I didn't take in everything that comes with that. I just saw all the glorious type of stuff that goes with it and how it's on TV and all that stuff. Little did I know all the extra stuff that comes with it as well. So my first job was DCF. It was called DSS back then, called Department of Social Services. Now it's called Department of Children and Family. I worked there for 6 months for the state of Massachusetts, working with adolescents and the CHINS unit, truancy, and stuff like that. And then I got into the police academy. So it was a vision from a young boy playing cops and robbers, family background with that, and then it came to fruition. After 6 months after I graduated from college. So.
And now talk about, because you just referred to, it's not exactly what you envisioned as a child that it
Yeah.
was. What
Yeah.
did you find out? How long did it take you to find that out?
Very quickly, very quickly. Because, I obviously just wrote a book. It's called Badge Bars to Beyond. And a lot of that extra stuff played into, my fall from grace, so to speak. And, being a police officer or a first responder, we see a lot of stuff that, ordinary people don't see. I'll probably seen more stuff, over my years than a single person sees ever. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that stuff affects you. It
Hmm.
affects you internally. Especially if you have children. Anything to do with kids. Whether that is
Sure.
fatalities of any kind. Whether that's car accidents, crib deaths, or anything else. There's a lot of the non-glorious parts of that job that come with it. And it's also, for me, it's stuff that I always stuck inside of me. Because
Hmm.
as a first responder or a police officer, and I think it's a little bit better today, but there needs to be a long way to go with it, is we're we're taught to give the help, not ask for the help.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And in these cases, a lot of the times is if somebody does come forward and they're having emotional problems around that, a stigma comes with that too because you're carrying a gun, you're the authority figure, and they're gonna
Yeah.
make it out to be that it's more than what it is. When we all need to talk, we all need to open up about the things that we see. Otherwise, it's gonna get worse and worse. And for
Right.
me, that's exactly what happened. I was living in my uniform. The divorce rate within police officers is very high, because of what I just said. We see a lot of things. We don't talk about it. We don't make a big deal about it. We think we become immune to it, but we really don't. Those behaviors come out in a lot of different ways. And for me, it came out with being distant at home, distant with my wife, my ex-wife now, distant with my kids. It affects us in a lot of different ways that we don't know how to handle, and all we are taught is just to keep moving forward,
Hmm.
just to keep moving forward. And a lot of my story, badge bars to beyond, the high level view is I was a police officer who got hurt on the job, got prescribed high amounts of pain pills because of who I was and my status in the community. They gave me more and more. I became addicted to them. I ended up losing my job over them. And I'll tell you how I lost my job was the chief sat me down and said, we heard some things are going on. He said, if you need some help, and, I like throwing this out there because he did offer me the help, but my mental state of mind at the time was, here's my friend who's also the chief of police sitting me down. Now he's at the chief of police position sitting me down,
Yeah.
not the friend. And all I heard was, tell me everything you know so I can fire your ass.
Hmm.
That's what I heard.
Right.
Because now all that guilt, all that shame, and everything else was sitting inside of me, and I was afraid of loss for everything that I've worked to up that point.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point there in that we hear, what we hear is through our own filters.
Absolutely.
We interpret, our own story is running in our head. And this is a big issue when you're talking about communication between other people,
Right.
communication issues,
Yeah.
because what somebody says and what they mean may not filter through properly because we're looking at it through our own lens.
Yeah,
And
because basically, as we get into it, I'm a trainer in NLP. I do a lot of work with people across the country, but this is what we do is the information that comes in, we delete, we distort, and we generalize information based on, our value system, our upbringing, our experiences, and everything else. And obviously, when somebody sits somebody down who's under the influence of a narcotic, you know what I
mm,
mean? And everything in my experiences up to that point, the fear set in.
yeah,
So I was prepared, not in a negative way, but in a way to protect my position, my family, my income at all costs possible. Knowing damn well what I was doing was not right, but by that point in my story, I was hooked. I was father of the year when I was on something, and I was like pushing a bowl of cereal over when I didn't have anything. And the problem became when the insurance companies ended up red flagging me probably 6 months down the line after giving me all of this medication and the doctors just prescribing and prescribing and prescribing stuff I shouldn't have been on in the first place.
mm-hmm,
But they prescribed it, and they never told me when they first gave it to me, here, take this and watch out for it. And I didn't know anything about addiction. I didn't All I knew that was when I took this pill that was the size of my pinky, that it made me be able to go to back to work faster. It took away all those internal feelings that I was feeling. And then when I didn't have anything, everything that I was feeling prior to ever picking up that pill came back tenfold, like tenfold.
right.
And it was, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because you didn't have any other tools, and they were giving
None.
you a tool that was
Yes.
serving many purposes, but they didn't tell you the downside parts of it, obviously, that you just said that. But yeah, so anytime somebody's given a tool that helps them cope with feelings that don't feel good,
Hmm.
they're going to take it and not want to give it back.
Yeah, exactly. And the result of that was, when I got red flagged and I didn't have anything and I needed something now to even just feel normal. It wasn't like I
Mm-hmm.
was getting high. I needed something just to feel normal, to be able to go to work, to be able to be an active member of society, you know, and I did the next best thing. This is where the dishonesty came in, and everything else is I would, tell my wife I needed a new bulletproof vest, I needed new boots, I needed a gun holster, I needed this, and then 2 months later, because I had to pay for stuff from people I knew from high school to get what I needed, and I'd be walking around in the same raggedy old shit. You know what I mean? Who am I fooling? You know what I mean?
Right, right.
And
She didn't question
and
that.
I think I had her head spinning in terms of what to believe and what not to believe, because some stuff was, left at the station where I changed there and this and that. Um,
Mm,
and the thing is, for me, after that, I eventually resigned, forcefully resigned from the job, and my wife left me. She emptied our bank accounts, probably rightfully so because of the stuff that I was going through. Um, and I was at a position in my life where everyone that I knew wasn't talking to me. Uh, the love of my life was gone. My kids weren't a part of my life. All those feelings of shame, guilt, and everything else that I had done up to that point were hitting me like a ton of bricks. Instead
mm-hmm.
of picking myself up, I got angry and I said, "Well, I'll show you." I'm like, I've been 10 years or 9 years on the job at that point. You know what I've sacrificed? I started pointing the finger. I got angry. And, the next year of my life was the worst year I ever had in my 47 years of my life. I caught so many different charges because I didn't have any money. I still needed, what I needed to be
Yeah.
normal and to act, not to feel like I was crawling out of my skin and going into, those many times I would put my gun in my mouth, but excuse my language, I didn't have the balls to pull the trigger. Do you know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
I did not want to live. I wished every day at that point in my life that I wouldn't wake up the next day, so I had to redo everything that I had to do to get what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
It was a terrible
It was
existence.
like Groundhog Day,
From that,
right?
oh, there it is. Every day was Groundhog Day of doing things, and I'd always say that I'll do this, this, and this, but I would never do that, and I'd always cross a line.
Mm.
to get what I needed because, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I talk about this a lot, and it's you couldn't trust yourself because you were not
Right.
keeping promises to yourself when you said, I'm going to do this, and then you didn't do it, and you'd cross another line.
Yeah.
We break integrity with ourselves when we do things like that.
Yeah, and I was a shell of who I used to be. At that point. And long story short, I ended up getting charged with trafficking. I got caught with 230 perk 30s, charged with trafficking. I was a police officer, high-ranking police officer who ended up going to prison. I did 2 years in prison. And let me tell you what, like 2 weeks into that stay, I kind of woke up from everything that's going on, and I said, "Fuck, how the hell did I get here?" It was like my life like flashed before my eyes. Raised well, college graduate, high-ranking police officer. Within 6 months, I'm sitting in a cell going, "How the fuck did this happen?"
Yeah.
After I had some clarity, you know, and that was the transition. I was away, my daughters were everything to me. And none of my decisions, I could say that, hey, nothing's more important to me than them. And honestly, in my heart, that's how I felt. But my actions up to that point weren't dictating that because I was so consumed with what was going on the inside and trying to self-medicate and everything else that nothing else mattered,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I couldn't be who I wanted to
I
be.
have so many questions
So,
now.
sure.
One, you said in the beginning that family is everything and, blood is thicker than anything. How did your family beyond your wife and your kids, like how did they respond? And did they know this was going on? And how did they support you after they found out?
Yeah, you read some in the book as well, but my father shares the same name as me. It was very hard on him, and he was very strict with me. When I went through and got caught up with stuff because of who I was, it was a juicy story to the media. All of my stuff was posted front page of the paper. So you can imagine being the football, baseball star, and all this. And now, for the first time in my life, I wasn't on the front page for good
Yeah.
news. It was for bad
Yeah.
news. It was all non-violent criminal offenses, but they were still
Sure.
felonies. Anything over $250. So my dad, totally shut me down. He was very hard. He took my ex-wife's side in terms of trying to push. I wasn't ready, so I was always trying to manipulate, and he wouldn't allow me to manipulate. So he stood his ground. My mother would always give me the shirt off her back. She was a huge enabler, but I don't say that in a bad way. I needed both. I needed
Yeah.
the love and I needed the stillness. But as I get older, and obviously the stuff that I know, people do the best they can with the resources they have. Do
Absolutely.
you know what I mean? And that's the resources my dad had. That was the resources my mother had. When I went to prison, nobody visited me but my mother. My dad did not come see me until the last 6 months before I was going to be released. And the big turning point for me, because there's not just about this story. My whole book is based upon, what happens after prison and how to build a life back that to be successful and everything else and all the stuff I did since then. That's just a small piece of me because I'm 47 years old. I refuse. I don't care how society wants to label anybody as a felon and put a stigma on anything. I love the quote that somebody took the same situation you're complaining about and they won with it. And when I was in jail, I started to have a little bit of spark back in me in clarity that I wanted to live. That was my first thing. I didn't want to die
Yeah.
anymore. I wanted to live. And when I decided that I wanted to live, you mean I had to come up with, what was I going to do? And what I say to a lot of people is I had to reach for things. I had to do some things that I had never done before. In terms of some personal development stuff, whether that was reading a book, motivational type of stuff. Do you
Yeah,
understand?
I was just going
And
to ask
and
that question. What
yeah.
helped you, what tools or techniques helped you turn things around?
first book I ever read cover to cover, and I'm almost ashamed to say it because I was never an avid reader. The Four Agreements.
Yeah.
Loved the book. I loved a lot because it really hit home for me. Obviously, with the traditional AA, NA, I read the NA book, the AA book. I'm like, oh, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me. But for me, it wasn't so much about substances. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It was more about the underlying reasons of why I was doing those things in the first
Mhm.
place. For me, it was like the perfect storm that happened, and it just happened to involve the substances. So I can relate on a lot of different levels. You know what I mean? And I stopped pointing the finger and I started taking responsibility because there was true power in taking responsibility for that. You know what I mean? When the first month I was in jail, I had a hit list. I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna
Mm.
get you. But that changed. Jail doesn't work for a lot of people, or prison, or whatever you want to call it. But it gave me the time I was unwilling to give myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It made me sit with myself. It made me evaluate things.
Right.
Which I could never do
Yeah,
before.
and that's a lot of people have to reach that point. Like my program, is called Fuck Being Fine because you reach that point where you're like,
Right.
I just can't do this anymore. And some people get there, I don't know, voluntarily, if on their own. And some
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
have to be put in a situation that forces them to look at it like you were.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. I work with a lot of people that have dependence problems across the country, and even high executive CEOs. Like when I wrote this book isn't just about drug addiction. That's part of my
Mm-hmm.
story, but it's about the bankrupt professional, the
Yeah.
reluctant divorcee. It's about the fallen leader. It's about anybody that has gone through challenges in life that were unbearing, whether they were publicly humiliated, whether they were just internally
Yeah.
embarrassed. I mean, whatever it may be, it's a GPS system on how to build a life worth living now.
Right.
And part of my story was getting out of jail, and when I moved to Florida, meeting my wife, where I checked that ego of being, the emergency response police officer, the athlete, the womanizer, like all that. Checked that ego because everything, my values, core, and everything else that up to that point served its purpose to a point. It was no longer working for me.
Right.
I needed to find other avenues and other ways in order to succeed with all the stigmas of what society and a felon and all that and make a life worth living. And that's what I did. My wife was into a lot of different modalities, whether it was meditation, whether it was yoga, whether it was NLP, A Course in Miracles, all that stuff that I said to you, you wouldn't catch me dead in one of those things 20 years
Well,
ago
yeah.
because my ego wouldn't have allowed me
And
to.
it almost did
But
catch you dead.
yes, and rightfully so. And I say to myself, I'm a religious man, I'm Catholic, and I believe in God. God brought that woman into my life, maybe because He knew that for me at first it was, oh, I want to get close to her. You know what I mean? So I'm like, oh, I'll go to that with you, sure, no
Right.
problem, right? But when I went to it, it caught me.
Hmm.
It gave me tools. And NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming, which is a fancy word for the roadmap to the mind. It changed my entire
Mm.
life because I'm a very skeptical
Yeah.
person. It allowed me to get rid of limited beliefs, and you can imagine how many of those there were. It allowed me to release anger, sadness, guilt. You mean, which I was just a walking throne of all that, and it allowed me to release this stuff within a matter of like 90 seconds.
Yeah.
That's how powerful this
It
stuff
is. It's
is.
really powerful. And it's all of the releasing of all of that. I know you'll agree with this. Is that's what matters. Like that you are no longer carrying it. You can't be responsible for what
Right.
other people are carrying or feeling towards
Absolutely.
what you experienced. It's about
Absolutely.
forgiving and releasing yourself from all of those feelings.
Yeah, true forgiveness too. You
Hmm.
mean because not, hey, I forgive you, and then like, behind someone's back. It's
Right.
about true forgiveness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And how can I expect people to forgive me for stuff that I've done in my past if I'm unwilling to forgive other people? And at the end of the day, I can only control what I do. I can't control anybody else. I can't control my wife. I can't control my mother. I try to control my kids. You know what I mean? But I can only control me and my response to things. And before in life, when we were talking about values, I was raised like eye for an
Hmm.
eye. Like I was the type of guy that I'd see you looked at me wrong. I'm like, you got a problem? I had to do a total transformation of who I was because that stuff was no longer working for me.
Right.
It's the same thing, and I don't like to pigeonhole, even though my story is about, dependence, and I help out a lot of people across the country get into different facilities. I do a lot of sober coaching and stuff out there, but I don't pigeonhole myself to that because I'm so vast in so many other ways. Like I help, successful CEOs improve their bottom line through communication skills,
Hmm.
in terms of marketing and stuff like that. My true passion is just helping anybody in general, regardless of what they're going through, regardless of what they're facing. I faced a lot in my life, and the one biggest thing that we have out there, and I think you'll agree with Lori, is coaching. Coaching's out there, but it's so underused because you have to have humility in order to jump into that. And humility is
Yeah.
the ability to ask for help. Just
Yeah.
because somebody comes to me for coaching doesn't mean that I'm any better than them. In life,
Right.
it just means that I have some expertise in a certain area that they may need assistance in, right? They may
Yeah.
have expertise in another area that I'm going to learn from. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's
Right.
like
And it
so
comes back to
unutilized.
your whole thing about right, humility, asking for help, because whatever thing they're facing at this moment, they just need a hand.
Yeah. And a lot of people, tend to hold on to their problems, and I was one of
Hmm.
them. I was that guy that when I was going through things before I had a change in mindset and everything else, I wanted to tell you all about my problems. I wanted to justify my
Yeah.
problems. I would tell the complete stranger, "Hey, look at my problems. Look at my
Yeah. And
problems."
then,
And justify them
right.
so I can't move forward in life. Like they labeled me a felon. I can't get a job now. What am I gonna,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then the interesting
No,
thing that happens with that is the more you focus on those problems, the more problems you get to focus on, because it works the opposite way
absolutely.
too, right? When you're focusing on
Yeah,
the good stuff, more good stuff
yeah,
comes in. I wanted to ask you a question about your
absolutely.
move to Florida.
Yeah, please
Was
help.
that because
Yeah.
were you, I mean, obviously people move to Florida because it's warm and they want to get out of the snow. But did you
Hmm.
move to get through a change of environment so that you weren't going back to the same environment in the fear that you might fall back into the same old patterns?
Great question. So when I first got out of prison, I moved back to my same old environment. I became a counselor at a detox. At first, I was a landscaper, right? I took a job landscaping because I really needed to pick up something. I used to hide behind trees when cruises went by because I was so
Mm.
embarrassed, right? Um, and then I started to work in behavioral health and that type of stuff. The reason why I moved to Florida was because after about a year and a half of living at home, I knew that I was capped at home because of all of my stuff being through the paper, because of being a star
Hmm.
once in that area, and then fall from grace. I had a stigma I really, no matter how I tried, I couldn't get away from. But the capping point when I was playing around with the idea of moving, and I stayed because of my
Hmm.
kids. I had two old, they're now 18 and 16. I stayed and I tried and I tried and I tried, but I could never do anything and escape my past. And I wanted to provide for them. I wanted to do some things,
Yeah.
right? Then I was on a boat with my cousin, who was like my best friend, a family gathering, and the boat unhooked from the bottom of the lake. We both were treading. A long story short, I saw my cousin die in
Oh
front
my
of me.
gosh.
Yeah, while we were both treading water, I barely got saved. There's another part in my life I shouldn't be
Mhm.
here. His 5 year old was in the water with a life vest that witnessed all
Oh my
this, and we didn't find him until the next day. And that was the moment I decided he was always my
God. Hmm.
rock, regardless of what I was going through in my life. He never judged me, tried to talk sense into me, my stubborn ass, and seeing him go under and not being able to do anything about it, I ended up relapsing for a week. It was too much for me to handle, even though I was going through everything.
Yeah.
I had no coping skills. I was barely holding on as it is, not living the life that I've always wanted to live and getting back in those feelings. And that was a cap for me. I ended up reaching out to a friend in Florida who owned a couple of places, and he knew my background. And he said, Joe, just come down here. I went down to Florida with the intention of coming back to the Cape because my kids were there. It was just time for me to get away, to reevaluate what am I going to do with my life. And I ended up being very successful down here. I ended up working a lot on myself. I ended up building two multi-million-dollar companies. I ended up Florida gave me the opportunity that Massachusetts was never going to
Yeah.
give me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I took it and I ran with it. But more importantly, before I ran with the career stuff, I worked so very hard on myself. I invested in myself, whether that was personal development type of stuff, whether that was trainings, whether that was certifications. I just wanted change. And the only way for me to change everything on the outside was to change what's going on the inside. And the reason why I love NLP so much is because it helped me through that process. Just because somebody wants to get certified, a lot of people come to us to get certified in NLP, hypnosis, time techniques, EFT, or life coaching, and a lot of people come in because they want to make more money, and that's fine. And they want the freedom to do it wherever they want, and I love that. That's not what I get excited about. I get excited about the fact that yes, you're going to make more money and you're going to be able to, add to your value. I go, but what I get excited about is what they don't know. And the fact is when you go through certification for, NLP, hypnosis, time techniques, all that, it's a lot of work that you do on yourself
Yeah.
first. The person you come in is not the person you leave. Yes, you're going to have shifts. You're going to have emotional breakthroughs. This is the stuff that I work with clients that were not certified on within minutes, I get so excited to see how people change when they come through it and how they blossom afterwards that it's so very important to me. And obviously you can see it on
Yeah,
my
I can
face.
hear it in your voice and I can see it on your face for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so Florida did a lot for me, and my current wife, who I'm be 9 years now, we've been married, three new kids, and that's what I write. I wrote the book, I made it. It's not a long book. I was never a person who would pick up and read a book, and I know most people don't read books cover to cover. I wanted this to be read cover to cover, so I made it short enough where it wasn't overbearing. It's not gonna, somebody who looks at it doesn't read. They're gonna be like, oh, I can read that.
Yeah.
You know, it's a book that tells a little bit about my story, but it also gives tangible tools that you can take away to apply to your life now. And it's an introduction to who I am and what else that we can offer. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And in all honesty, I haven't read the book yet. However, it is at the top of my list. I got a stack of books over here, and I'm really eager to get into it and to read what
And I was
people
very excited. Yeah, I was very excited. It made number one bestseller on Amazon. Not on the bestseller list, number one bestseller. It was like 4 weeks in a row, and I think it's still in the top 100, which is unheard of.
Congratulations. That is an amazing, awesome accomplishment. Tell us the name of the book again.
It's called Badge Bars to Beyond. It's how I came back from sinning to winning. Written by me, Joe Kelly, and you can get it on Amazon.
Okay, I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes. I'm also going to
Awesome.
put a link to how people can get in touch with you if they want to continue a conversation, which is, tell me
Sure.
that.
You can go to our website. It's called obtainingmastery.com. And if somebody wants to talk, you can book a free consultation on the call, or even if you just want to talk. You can also find me on Facebook. It's Joe Kelly. That's my author page. Or you can find me, Joe Kelly, on my personal page. I'm an open book,
Okay,
as you
yes,
can tell.
yes.
all my dirty laundry's been aired out over the front pages of papers. But here's my big thing, Lori, is I feel, and I truly feel this, that if I can be vulnerable about my situation, there's a lot we didn't cover, and there's a lot that I don't mind talking about to anybody. If I can be vulnerable about my situation, maybe that's going to help somebody who's dying silently. And I don't mean to be like, so far left or so far right. It doesn't mean that you have to be dying. It just means that you need to, you have obstacles that you need help with in life. Did I lose you, Lori?
Joe, I don't know if you can still hear me because everything is frozen.
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, awesome. And it's a great question because I think a lot of the values and beliefs that I was raised with, got me to a certain point in my life, and then they stopped serving me at a certain point in my life. So I'm from North.